Hey, Mass, how are you?
Great. How are you? It's been a long time since I've been on a pod with you.
I was good. I was laughing. I was like, okay, long time since we spoke because I think we speak a
At least once a
couple
day.
times most days. So I was like, okay, we're gonna go down this path. But no, okay, yeah, podcast with each other. Yeah, you have your one in the advisor space, and I have my one in the. We used to do them together, right? And
Yeah. It's
they
probably
got
been
such
at least 6 months since we
yeah,
did one. Yeah.
they got such bad views that we had to stop the joint. But no, yeah, it's good to be back. Good to be chatting about software again. Yeah, I think that for this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about workflow tools. I don't, is workflow tools the right word? Automation tools? I don't,
I call it,
orchestration. I don't, yeah.
yeah, okay. Those all work actually. But yeah, I call them workflow management tools. We probably should have found the right name before we started. But hey, episode one, people will get what we're talking about shortly.
Yeah, basically, I think it's a category kind of like Kleenex, and that like the main brand defines the space. Like it's Zapier tools, basically, is what I'm getting at. And I think that's what most people know it is, I think. But anyways, today we're going to be talking about a couple up and comers, couple new ones we've been seeing. I think these companies have been around for a bit, but I guess just for us, we're hearing about it more. I'm seeing it more, and I've seen like some LinkedIn posts about some of these, so we'll get into it here. So I'll start with mine. I'll kind of do my pitch, and then you can grill me. How's that sound?
Great. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, all right. Well, yeah, the one I'm looking at, or the one I did look at, and we have a YouTube video in the description that kind of walks through it specifically. But the one I'm looking at is one called N8n. So first of all, I thought it was like, do you say the eight? Do you kind of say Naden or nation
It's
or
a
I don't know?
weird
No,
name. Yeah.
yeah, I don't like that
Did
actually.
they
So
give, like, what does it mean? Do you know?
no, I don't
Okay. All
know.
right. Okay.
I should have maybe looked that up, but maybe we could throw it on the screen or something. But no, N8N. That's what it is. I was saying Nathan for like a week, and then no, it's N8N. And yeah, I mean, you know what? It's a tool that yeah they fully acknowledge is very similar to Zapier. You have triggers, and those triggers go through and trigger a series of actions. I think for all these guys, when they do it, their biggest thing is to, okay, how do we differentiate to a Zapier, right? How do we stand out from this tool that's been around for a while, that has a ton of integrations that everybody knows, that's relatively easy to use? How do we do it? And what these guys, I think, have done, the biggest thing I would say is that they really try to make it for developers. A couple simple examples I'll tell you is like, oh, you can self-host it actually. I don't know if you watch my video, but
I've seen that.
it can, I would never do that, but obviously I think there's people in the community that really would. So you can like download it to your local computer, just run the software, and don't have to pay a dime for it. Now they have different editions just to kind of protect themselves a little bit, but that's one way that they do that. Number two is that you can have like multiple environments, right? That's a very developer thing, and those environments are like hosted on Git, which is kind of similar to GitHub. So you can have a dev environment, right, where you just build all these things and test them out and flow them through, that you can then very easily then merge into your production environment, which is, where you're more production. So again, good version control is something that obviously a lot of developers really like. And then finally, I guess just kind of one like very specific example of how they do that is like literally if you think about like a Zapier or maybe Make, I know that's the one you're going to be looking at, as you bring in old fields into the next step, right? So if I fill out a form, my first name, last name, email, and now in the next step, I'm trying to push that into something like a CRM. As I'm actually putting in those fields, I can write JavaScript. So I can actually literally say, this is how I'd like to transform this field. If it's a text field, a string field, I can do different transformations, uppercase, lowercase, whatever. And then if it's a number, I could even do, arithmetic with it, right? I can add stuff and aggregate stuff and do so. You just have that added level of control that I think something like a developer would really like, right? And so I think that's really where they're trying to find their spot. And I think they do it pretty well. I think they have a pretty good community. Like if you look up and they really push it, and they have a lot of community notes, templates. They're really trying to push that in. And, I think people appreciate that. People who are going to be in these types of things day in and day out. All those team things are, I guess, features that they'd appreciate: community, version control, being able to write custom scripts, all pretty valuable. I guess the thing for me, and I don't know if I'm kind of just talking down to my own tool that I'm thinking about here, but the trick for me is, why would a developer who's able to do all these things like version control and this and that, why wouldn't they just write the code? I guess, and I don't know. So that's my only maybe con with it, is to say, okay, like, yeah, you're going in here and you're doing all these really crazy things, why do it through a tool? Like, I didn't really get that fully. Like for me, Zapier, again, maybe that's how my brain's wired, is thinking back to Zapier is for those people who not can't, but don't have, yeah, maybe can't code, can't get in there and spin up a server and write some JavaScript and host it somewhere and run that code. That's what I thought Zapier was always for. But now they're kind of blurring those two lines together. I said, who's this really for? And obviously they got a huge community and there's someone for it, but I just couldn't really nail that specifically. I guess I'll pause there and just kind of, I don't know, get your questions on that. Cause yeah, that one for me was just like, okay, definitely developer, but what a very specific type of developer, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I mean, I did take a look at it and I watched part of your video. The only thing I can think on that, and maybe again, I'm helping your case here and we're trying to compete. But
Yes.
anyways, maybe their idea of developer is changing. And I think the whole world's idea of developer is changing, where it's like no one's going to write code in a year or two or in a few years. And so it's all of this to them. They're making a bet on a developer just being a prompt engineer, which is, I think, right. Who needs to write JavaScript next year or now? And so I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah.
But the thing, like, I am personally biased towards open source things. And I know this isn't fully open source, but they're
Pretty
kind of
close.
going that way.
Yeah.
I like that. But I think it does stunt your growth a little bit, just from, it's good to pick a market, it's good to pick a niche, but at the same time, I think they really need to, I don't know, like it doesn't seem like they have a lot of integrations compared to some of these other guys.
No,
When
they
did
don't.
these guys come out? Like, are they really new or do you not know?
I don't know
Like mine
specifically.
came out in 2016, so it's like 9 years now. So maybe that's why it has more. I was surprised, like, and maybe they're just like, we're only integrating.
2019, yeah, 2019. So
Okay, 6 years. Yeah.
yeah,
It might be, and I honestly don't know how these companies, like all these tools you integrate with, make money. Like maybe they have a different revenue model and that's why they don't have as many integrations. But I saw that as a glaring difference between a lot of the other tools. Like mine is in the many thousands of tools, Zapier, who knows how many. So
way more. Yeah,
it might be the open source model, it might be the rev share model, but
I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I guess 2 points there. One, you talk about people just aren't going to be, they're not going to be developers anymore. What made me think is they almost are making like their own language. And I'm sure Zapier and even Make probably has it on their back end, but these guys are open sourcing it. Like I can literally take my flow and export it to like a JSON. So they have like almost like a standard schema that's like, this is, and I could take that and I can load it up into any version of n8n, my self-hosted, my web hosted. And so where I'm going with that is I'm saying if there's enough of that on the internet and these are getting fed into these LLMs, right? You talk about no one doing that. Maybe that's their big bet, right? Where they're saying we're almost making like our own language, our own way that these AI tools can say, hey, if you want to make a n8n flow that does this or that, you could just prompt. That'd be cool. I mean, that's a
yeah,
cool idea.
that would be.
So that's it there. And then, yeah, they don't have a ton of integrations. And what I saw really in a lot of their customer facing stuff is, yeah, less so about the integrations. Yeah, they do some cool stuff. Multiple triggers, that's one big thing that they talk about, kind of different flows, and those are all good things. And I think Make does that too. But they really were pushing their AI agent, right? So this, it's basically kind of like ChatGPT's assistant, where you can kind of tell it, hey, you're a customer success rep and you need to answer these questions. But the really kind of interesting thing for me is that it could get information through those other integrations that they have. So you could add as what they call a tool, your Google Calendar to the AI agent. So very easily you can feed in information personal or specific to you or your organization to do that. So maybe that's just more it. It's like, hey, we're going to do less in terms of these integrations. It's not going to be for the everyday person, but we're going to do the common tools and we're going to go really deep and really sophisticated functionality. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I know from looking at their site, they're made in Berlin, and I know a lot of German companies these days. I mean, both of us are in the crypto world, and a lot of stuff is coming out of there, like anti-establishment, open source, community focused, etc. And so they're on trend there.
Decentralized.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it sounds weird, but I do like that model. I think they just got to figure out getting more people on there. And I don't know how you felt, but my vibe is that I probably should have watched your video a bit more, but how's the interface? Is it like a bit intense, or is it, because usually if they're targeting devs, they're like, okay, these guys can figure out most things.
Yeah, it's a bit more intense, right? Like, I made a comment, like just the terminology was off, right? Like, I was connecting to Zoho CRM And instead of the module or the table, like saying, I want to put this into leads or clients, a module is probably a word people know. They said like resource, right? They're like, what
Okay.
resource do you want to get? So
Mine
there's
called it
stuff like
object, which is what Salesforce calls it. So yeah,
resource is like very developer speak, I think. Also, and again, maybe this is the whole point we're making, which is they're all focused on the back end, open source, this and that. Like the front end, the UI, I could tell they didn't really invest in maybe call it the UX, right? Where I would complete a step and then there would be like no done button. I'd have to like exit the window and I'd be like, is this thing saved? And it would be. So it was fine. But it was just like, is this right? I had to
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like to check myself for a sec. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the my basic things were the things I was going to ask. I think we covered like why do they have less integrations? I don't think we fully know, but I think part of it honestly is probably because so many people are writing open source code on Git and stuff that like maybe they don't need as many. Maybe that's what they're banking on. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, the other thing too, right, is that it could be, because you can just do web requests, right? So maybe they're just like, listen, we have so many developers in here. The difference between them authenticating themselves with whatever thing through our fancy front end or them just writing an API request isn't that big, right? We're going to focus on just the actual flows. That's what we're going to be good at. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's what it would be.
And just so I'm clear, like I can literally download this onto my local machine and not pay for it and use it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's like a community edition. So there's an
Okay.
enterprise edition, and it's like, okay, we take out these whatever 5 or 6 features. But yeah. But you gotta. It's like all in like your terminal, right? If you go to
Yeah.
the docs, it's like open up your terminal and write these bash commands, and it's again for someone who knows that, it's like easy, whatever this. But for even me, I don't know. I'll put myself in this category. I'm like, get a little scared doing that. I was like, I don't want that. What am I doing? What am I
Yeah.
downloading? What's this NPN? And I could probably figure it out, but it's yeah, and it could be free. So again, yeah, they're banking. Okay, enough community members download it themselves, start building all these templates and adding to the community that someone could come along and pick up, or an LLM could come along and pick up, that this open source decentralized model is going to win the day. Right. And I think that's what they're really banking on.
And then pricing wise, they look pretty competitive actually. I don't know if you did a full comparison.
Nah, I didn't go too deep in the
Yeah.
pricing, but honestly, I would say it's, Zapier's is pretty complicated. That's like the main
Yeah.
knock, I think, for Zapier. They're like a little bit complicated. Make it super simple. I think that's one thing that
Yeah.
maybe you talked about that. And it's, I think, something they actually talk about. They're like, I wouldn't say it's a differentiator or really, it's just kind of like, it's
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of in the middle, right? So it's not
It's in
really,
euros, which is interesting.
yeah, I haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
let's switch gears. Let me hear your pitch. I know we've been alluding to it a bit, but love to hear it, and then we can then I'll grill you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think you guys probably heard, but I reviewed Make. So make.com is the website. For those of you that don't know, they've been around since 2016. They used to be called Integromat. And so some of you may know them there. I would say they're more consumer facing brand, like everyday consumer. I would say more of a direct competitor from a branding perspective, I would say, to Zapier. I don't think they took as much of a deviation or niche down as much as n8n. So to Tom's point earlier, they really focus on simplicity. Visual editor is really bubbly and in your face. Yeah. The integrations are there's a ton of them. I actually found them a few years ago, just tinkering around. You'll find out more that I like doing that with an app called Notion. And I found some guy on YouTube that built integrations through Integromat at that time to update Notion boards and stuff. So they're very big in like that community of tinkerers, but not coders, I would say, not developers. Yes. Pricing is very straightforward. As Tom said, it's a bit different. They actually charge, what do they call it? I should have remembered this. They call it
per like flow
operation.
Operation.
So in their system, a scenario is their flow. So to get from start to end is a scenario. Now you may have 3 operations in that scenario. And so it can actually be not the most competitive pricing if you're not careful how you do your operations. But you get like 10,000 a month for $10 a month, and you get 1,000 per month for free. They definitely have a very flexible free model, but I think the one Tom was just showing, they bill it per scenario or workflow. So you could have 10 things happening. They don't care. They just bill you per. Whereas this one, if you have 10 things happening, that's 10 of your operations for the month. So even as I was testing and making the YouTube video, I used like 100 operations. So I mean, you got to
That's-
tread lightly, but the coolest part I found in there, like the ease of use was really, really good. The debugging was really, really simple. They have a great like flow chart on seeing if something worked or didn't work. And then the last part that I thought was unique about them, and talking prior to this demo, I don't know how unique it really was, but one of the things they really brand themselves on, they have whole articles on it, are these scenario builders that don't actually need any integrations to start the scenario. So they would actually say,
Oh, yeah.
okay, for internal operations, so they're branding a lot to companies, you may have things that you need people to type in. For example, hiring a new staff, you want to put in their first name, last name, email, and phone number, and you hit go, and then it will run all these scenarios. So I'm very used to, okay, the entry point is a webhook or a form in another software or whatever. This was actually the entry point is make, and then you can run that flow one off. And so I thought that was pretty neat. Yeah, I mean, their history, they've really kind of grown over the last couple of years, just doing some research. I think they got acquired by a big kahuna a little while ago. They're saying it's a $13 billion company called Celonis. So anyways, for a while, they were this kind of clunky,
Scrappy.
uglier
Yeah.
tool. Now they've really zhuzhed it up.
Probably
have
have some good bones, and these guys came in and said, "Hey, yeah, interesting." Yeah. No, interesting. The first off on the price, like the pricing, I looked up this like Make versus Zapier as a Reddit post, and someone pricing was like 5 of the 7 comments. Like it was just like, it's cheaper. It's a cheaper Zapier. And that's okay. I mean, whatever, it's a cheaper thing. But I remember in the post is that they were kind of comparing apples to oranges, right? Because they'd say, okay, well, Zapier charges X dollars per, I think they call it a Zap run in Zapier.
Yeah.
Which again is if you have 10 steps, that's one Zap run. I'm going through 10 steps. But what you're saying is that actually in these guys, if they had 10 steps, that's 10 operations or whatever they call it.
Yeah. I think they've changed this. Like it used to be per Zap run, I think. But the other thing too is like even all over their website, they being Make, they say it's still cheaper than Zapier.
Oh,
but
I'm sure it's
to
still
your
cheaper.
point, it's not really comparing the same thing. Your tool is more like Zapier's cost, I think.
Yeah. I think so. I think it is. Yeah. So pricing's there, and then I do know. I think I saw somewhere else on their website. They're like, we have more integrations than Zapier, which maybe is true, right? Maybe they went in on that, right? Of just a proliferation of a lot of different tools versus Zapier, which I think invests more in their UI and things like that, making it super simple. I guess what's the use case then? Is it like, why would I use Make instead of Zapier? Is it just if I want to A, save some money, or B, access some like very obscure tool that maybe Zapier doesn't have? Like, I'm trying to find that because like, what was the market, I guess? Because I think n8n, okay, we're trying to go for community, this, that. Zapier, this is the everyday guy who doesn't know how to code. And Meg, I think, was trying to be somewhere in the middle, and I don't get it. And maybe it's just a price thing. Maybe it's just what it is at the end of the day. I don't. But did you kind of get a sense as you were tinkering around, as you say, tinkering?
Yeah. At least so. All these guys have templates to make it kind of easy to get moving. This one has like an AI agent that can build templates for you. I tried it. It was mediocre. But like I think where they're leaning is more to like social media agencies and marketing agencies. Like almost everywhere I was in there, they're like, are you a salesperson? Are you a marketing agent? Here's templates for you. Like it kept asking me that. When you go to their homepage and you look at solutions, like those are the first 2 areas that they work a lot in. So, I mean, honestly, its price is like you said, but then I think they're really trying to market towards those couple verticals or whatever, what I mean?
Verticals, I guess. I don't know.
But I couldn't, the
functions, I guess.
Like once you get into it, the interface is really nice. It's way easier to use. But if I'm researching online.
Easier than what though? Like what easier than?
So the 2 tools I'm used to are Zapier and Zoho Flow. And we didn't talk about either of them, I guess, today, but it is kind of, I think yours is like this too, where it's kind of like a blank slate with bubbles and you connect all the bubbles. So
a bit more of a canvas. You can kind of,
Zapier is the only one kind of stuck in linear land.
And I think that's on purpose, right? Like I think
it must be. Yeah,
exactly. So, okay.
And this one, they kept talking about scale as well. They're like, this can scale. And they have this thing where you can visually see all your things on like this checkerboard. But honestly, it was price that they're getting people in with. And that was the biggest thing. But they do have kind of a branding angle, marketing and sales that they're really pushing.
they do it nice and bubbly like that. And I think maybe an interesting thing with them is that, from what hearing you is, okay, they like the big bubbly visuals. They seem to have this tool that you talked about where you can kind of see all the things built for scale, this and that. And also you can get in there and actually type some things in and hit go. From what I understand, or maybe what they're going for, and I don't know if there's a good thing or a bad thing, is they want you in it all day, right? Like a Zapier, or like, again, even this n8n type tool. Like, I set it up once, now it's running. Hopefully I never actually have to open up this tool again.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Whereas for these guys, and for better or for worse, I guess, right? I mean, in my opinion, with these types of tools, is that you do have to constantly tweak them, right? Like, when we work in our capacity as business owners, and people always come, hey, can you build apps for us? And we've done that in the past, and it always fails, because what inevitably happens is that the input information changes, or the way Zapier does their thing changes, and you have to go and tweak it and iterate on it and do that sort of stuff. And it doesn't work if you're like kind of going through a third party to do that. So I do like that, where it's like, hey, stay in the software, stay here, because hopefully, okay, you're going to get some more functionality, but also it just becomes part of your day to day, right? It just becomes part of your vocabulary.
Yeah, there was definitely a whole angle of sharing and team and having multiple people in a a scenario at once. Yeah, having the Kleenex scenario here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good point. And they're definitely trying to do that. I never, and that's why I thought it was so unique. Now, you said your tool does it, but like being able, I think that curse that you're mentioning, where it's like, once you set up a Zap, I never look at it again unless I get an error ping.
Yeah.
But this one, to actually sit in there and type into the Zap, into the scenario, I've only ever had to do that to debug or set it up. But they're like, no, come in here, type in your 15 scenario variables, and it'll run. It's like, what? So that is an interesting angle that you're pointing out. And maybe now that they're owned by some big kahuna, they're going to build out all kinds of things to keep you in the tool more. I don't know. But yeah, it's overall, it was a cheaper, bubblier, easier to use tool than Zapier. Honestly, I felt much more comfortable in it, especially like they even had little tools you could hit a button and so you have all your bubbles, and they can get kind of confusing. And they have all these, like they have a router, which is like a logic bubble that can, and you hit a button and you say, show me, I think it was like walkthrough. And it would actually have like a little purple bubble going through to show you how things move, like kind of like hopscotch. And so they really focus on like
interesting
non-developers, I guess.
Yeah, it's more that. Yeah, non-develop. And I think, we talk about Zapier being linear on purpose. It's probably for that, right? Where it's like, maybe at one point they tried some complex, because the idea of a branch, right? Where it's like, if this, then that, that's not crazy, right? No. It's like, if whatever, go this way or go that way. But they've stayed away, right? The Zapier team. And probably because what you're describing, where they had a bunch of these non-developers coming in and they just got confused. And they're like, the amount of maybe support tickets they got, just explaining what some of these, how the whole thing flowed together, it was a bit too much. So maybe that's it. Maybe they're kind of saying, okay, we're going to go out, we're going to do complex stuff, we're going to go crazy here, and it's going to be for non-developers. And so we just have to really invest in, like you said, making it nice and bubbly, walking through this and that. I mean, it's
yeah. And there were all kinds of errors, like it would pop up like with warnings where you could potentially loop here, which is maybe why Zapier, they got tired of all the tickets being like, you ran out of Zaps.
Yeah. Or the bill that it was 20 grand because they just had an infinite loop for a month.
Yeah. And just going along the earlier, I don't know if yours had this, but this one had, I think you're right with what you said, where they're really wanting people to live in it, because this one actually had like note-taking features on each of the bubbles, and you could actually comment at teammates on what's happening and when. And so like, it's almost like a Google Doc of flows.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So we're just reviewing the same tool here. No, but it's a good point, right? It's like, okay, you want someone to come in. I guess for me, maybe for both of these, it's just like, I don't know if people want to do that. Like, I get your point. I get you want people in here. Sure, that could be nice for you as a software. I think, like all things, as we're reviewing these softwares or any tool or any feature, it's like, what problem are you actually solving? It's like, are you just making a feature that's fancy and cool, or are you actually, is this a real life problem? And I don't know. I don't know if it is.
I think it might be one of those cases where Zapier was making a ton of coin. Other people saw angles to come in with price or maybe open source, and here we are. I mean, their interfaces, I personally like my makes better than Zapier. I enjoy the kind of bubblier. I don't know how you felt about yours, but
Neutral.
yeah, okay.
I mean, actually, I didn't like what I was describing earlier, whereas like I didn't know if I was done. Like, I
Right,
think I
yeah.
said this, it's kind of like that. So yeah, I think that's it. I mean, and I think that's just it, right? Is that these guys are coming in. Yes, there's the Kleenex in the space, the big elephant, and for better for worse, when there's that such a big elephant, you gotta try and get creative a little bit, right? You gotta kind of just say, okay, we're gonna be for developers, or we're gonna be for teams, and you're gonna live in it. Because if you're just gonna come in and just say, hey, when this happens, do that, no one's going to use you, right? So you gotta get a little creative, and maybe that's just the reality of the space when there's such a big person in it. So any final thoughts as we wrap here, Mash? And then I'll let the audience know how they can vote, so to speak.
I would say, I mean, nothing particularly about either of these apps. I think this space is going to get really interesting just because integration has, I mean, we've been doing this for a while, what we do outside of this YouTube channel. It's going to become more and more important. And so whether it's Zapier, whether these ones, I think a lot of people are going to be jumping on these. And so it's a great space to play in. I like how some of these tools are making it easier to move around, but to what we talked about, what you just said, like, I don't know if either of these really kick Zapier's butt.
Yeah, exactly.
But they are interesting angles, and yeah, so
See how
check
they
them out.
play out over the next couple of years. And honestly, probably all these guys, I'm sure, are thinking it's like, how does an AI feed into this, right? Because yeah, the future of coding, so to speak, is everyone's saying, hey, AI is going to write all the code. So how do these guys fit in? Well, I think a lot of what they can do is allow the AIs to write the code, but then the humans to come in and at least follow along, right? Especially if a non-developed. So maybe that's their angle, right? The AI is going to write all that stuff, but we're just going to provide maybe the visual front end, or maybe we're going to provide, I don't know, just a way where you can actually understand what's going on. Maybe that's just where or maybe we just provide authentication, right? Where the code's going to write all the stuff, but to connect to your CRM or to your whatever, we'll make that part easy at least. So we'll see. But yeah, just to wrap how we're doing it on the channel here, this is, I guess, supposed to be a bit of a competition, but end up we're not really,
Helping each other out here, but
yeah, digging into each
it's
other too much.
episode 1.
Yeah, we'll refine it. But the idea is basically, we want to have a little bit of a competition going. Who's picking the better tools? Who's doing the better reviews? So we each have a YouTube video up now on Mass on Meg, me on n8n, and we're just gonna look at the views. So views for the first 7 days. We didn't post them at the same time, but we'll kind of say, hey, for the first 7 days of each, and whoever has the most views will win, so to speak, and we'll kind of keep a tally going, and yeah, it'll be fun. Get some healthy competition, which I think will be good. But
Awesome.
yeah, we'll wrap it up there, and thanks everyone for listening.